Live from Myrtle Beach, it's ScaryCast. I'm Dr. John Stamey and glad to be with you tonight. We got a really great guest. I met him at the Georgia Bigfoot Conference with one of his Bigfoot groups, NC Investigates or NCI. They were a lot of fun to have. They drew quite a crowd. And so I said, listen, we got to have you on ScaryCast. And here he is. This is Tim Dills. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you here. And Tim is from Franklin, North Carolina, which
Yes,
is the new home of the North Carolina Bigfoot Conference. And we're certainly glad to have you here. And we're looking forward to having that event. That's going to be on the 16th of November up at the community center across from Ingalls. That's all you need to know. Just ask anyone, where's the community center across from Ingalls, and they'll tell you, right, Tim?
yes, they'll tell you just go down the Georgia Road and you can't miss it.
That sounds great. Well, we'll all be there, and I spoke with George, and I hope you're going to be there too.
Oh, yes, sir, without a doubt.
We'd like to have you there, and it'll be a lot of fun. We're going to go around putting up some posters there in Franklin here really soon, and I'm just looking forward to it. So, anyway, thanks a lot. Now, you are what I call a Bigfoot explorer, right?
Yes, sir. Since I had my first encounter in 2008, I've I do quite a bit of research, just not for nobody but me and myself and the groups I'm in, that kind of stuff.
Well, that's great. So, you're also in what, at least one other group, correct? Along with NC Investigates, what other groups are
Uh,
you in?
the other group that I'm in is Dirty South Squatching, and you can find them on you not YouTube, but Facebook. You can find them on Facebook, and that's the uh, that's the group that I actually got started with. And the guys on there, Bob Trent and Dwight Campbell, they got me into uh, recording my research and that kind of stuff because I was just going out and having fun and just filming stuff every once in a while. But they've got me to where that I actually put quite a bit of time in. Our audio recorders, they'll run 24 hours a day for 2 weeks, and then we go in and change them out. And they're still working on me carrying cameras and stuff because I do a lot of my squatching while I'm deer hunting, hog hunting, squirrel hunting, that kind of stuff. So I ain't loaded down with cameras yet, but they're working on me to get me there.
Gotcha. All right. Well, now tell us, had your first Bigfoot experience in 2008, right?
Yes, sir. Um,
So tell
buddy,
us about it.
a man moved up above me. His name was Newsom Corbett, and I was outside skinning a deer, and he moved in, and you just had to meet him. Unfortunately, he's passed on now, but when he moved in, he walked up and said, "Hey, my name's Newsom Corbett. I moved in up above the hill up here above you, and I see you like hunting fishing." I mean, he was a fast talker, and I was trying to skin the deer, and he turned around and walked off. And my wife said, "Who was that?" I said, "Well, God, his name is Newsom Corbett. He likes to hunt and fish, and he'll see me in 2 weeks." So in 2 weeks, he come down and he explained to me that his wife's family had land up here that they would come up maybe 2, 3 times a year at the most and stay the weekend, that kind of stuff, and then they'd go back to Florida. But he had moved in permanently above me and wanted me to go with him on the property to help him get it set up for deer and deer hunting and that kind of stuff. And I told him, I said, that ain't no problem. So um, we was out setting up uh, our deer feeders and that kind of stuff. And he told me, he said, we've got to do one thing. And I said, what's that? He said, we've got to get even with my boys. He said, about a year ago when they was up here, on one of my trail cams, they took a set of antlers out of the cabin of a fallow deer and stuck it in front of the camera. And I thought that they was some kind of weird deer running around up here, and just drove him crazy until he found out that they'd played a prank on him. So he said, we got to get even with them. And I said, okay, well, back in the 70s, my dad and one of his friends come across a set of footprints way back up on a place called Standing Indian. It's a national forest, and it's big campground and all that stuff. And they was in there deer hunting in December and come across a set of barefoot tracks that was huge. And I told him, I said, I'll uh, make us a set and we'll scare the far out of them. And his boys was in their mid-20s. And so I made a set. We got a good joke on them. And I mean, it freaked them out real good. And everybody had a big life out of it. Well, after that, weird things started to happening. We started, the first thing that happened was we was up in his loft. There was a um, wild hog coming in and rooting the yard up in the cabin. So he told me, he said, we need to kill that. It's rooting the yard up. And where the property is, it's behind a locked Forest Service gate, but they've got a key that they can get in and that kind of stuff. And so we was setting up there, and 3 coons come out. And the coons come out and run around and all that stuff and went back in a little old swampy branch. And when they did, something grabbed one of them. And that coon started squalling. I don't know if your listeners have ever heard a coon squall, but it makes a terrible racket. And all of a sudden, that coon was squalling, and you just heard a big, and everything went dead quiet. And I told my buddy, I said, buddy boy, I know all the animals that they are in these woods. I've seen the red wolves, the black panthers, the mountain lions. We've got them all. And whatever that was made that racket is nothing that I've ever heard before. And in just a minute, it started to whistle. And I looked at him and I said, and I definitely don't know nothing that roars like that and then can start whistling. And it would whistle about every 5, 6, 7 seconds, something like that. And he was like, well, let's go see what it is. And when we turned the light off, the whistling stopped. I mean, when we turned the light on to come out of the top of the attic of the cabin, it quit whistling. So we come out, didn't see nothing, didn't hear nothing, nothing like that. So we come on to the house, and that was the first encounter we had with them. And then it seemed like the more that we was on his property, that the more encounters we've had. We I don't know if anybody's ever heard the yell that Bobo does on Finding Bigfoot, the big, long, drawn out yell that he does. But we had one that was so close to us, your whole body just vibrated. And it just started from that first encounter. And the more we was up there, the more things we had going on, rocks thrown at us, sticks thrown at us. Our trails going up to where we deer hunt, we've had them piled full of brush and limbs and trees and all that stuff they would carry in. And it's just grown from there.
Do you still go up there? Because
Uh,
this was your neighbor's property, right?
yeah. Since he's passed away, I've not been back up there. But one of the research areas that we do is just across the ridge. May if it if you was walking it, it might be quarter mile, if that long, just to go up and across the ridge from where one of our major research areas is. And up there on his property, I've actually heard them talk 2 different times. I had killed a deer, and they come in the next week. They came in and carried the gut paws off. They'll come in and they won't be a hair left. They won't be a drop of blood left. They won't be nothing left at all. It's like you seeing a cleanup crew in there and just cleaned it up, but there's not a leaf out of place or nothing. If you didn't know that you had gutted a deer there, you know, you'd never find it. If you just told somebody to go find it, they'd never find it. that's how much they uh, carry off and stuff. And I'd killed a deer up there, and I was going back in to hunt the next week on a Tuesday, and I was sitting there, and I heard somebody talking, or I thought it was somebody, and I was sitting there listening, and I thought, well, that language, I don't understand that language. And I texted my buddy, and I told him, I said, somebody's on your property. He said, well, just sit still because they'll have to turn lights on to leave. And we sat until way after dark and no lights come on. And that was on a Tuesday. And on Thursday of the same week, we were back up there. And about the same time, about 30 minutes before pitch black dark, they started talking again. And I told him, I said, they're here again, whoever that is. And but their language I don't understand. I said, it's not Japanese, it's not Mexican, it's not Native American completely. It sounded a lot like Native American with monkey gibberish thrown in on it. Some of the sounds and stuff they was making. So we said again until way after dark, and never did. No lights come on and all of that stuff. And um, me and my dad was up there hunting, and I was back in the same place in 2016, and I was sitting there, and I heard what I thought was a herd of deer coming through the woods. 2016 was extremely dry. That's when we had all the um, real bad fires and everything was in 2016. And I heard something coming. I thought it was deer, and then it quit. So I just kept sitting there, and about 50 yards out from me, a rock hit about the size of a golf ball. And I thought, well, I'll just see how close they're going to throw a rock because, and by we'd been running into them for 8 years, so we'd learned a lot about them and know that they wasn't going to hurt us or nothing like that. And it throwed one about 50 yards, and then about 40 and 30 and then 10, and then the last one hit about a foot and a half from my foot. And I got my dad on the phone, and I told him, I said, the Bigfoots are up here and they're throwing rocks at us, and it's time for me to go. So he had one of his encounters. They was down at where I left him at. There was two of them down there whistling back and forth at him while I was climbing the mountain up to where I was hunting at. So on my buddy's property, we had just untold encounters. Like I say, getting yelled at, screamed at, all of that stuff, rocks throwed. Um, we've uh, we've heard them actually try to sound like crows and coyotes and that kind of stuff. But you can tell that if you've been in the woods hunting much, you can tell the difference pretty quick. But that's when it all started, and then I got with the BFRO. They come up and actually filmed uh, finding Bigfoot there. They done their Bobo come out and done invest. They sent a guy named Jim Kerminsky to start with, and he come out and he said, "Yeah, you definitely got them here." So I was on the show when they sent Bobo out, and up there on my buddy's property, they got 3 wood knocks that night, and that's where I first started running into them and having encounters. And I never did really do that much as far as keeping evidence. Um, Sometimes I'd take a picture of a foot track or something like that, or we had 10 on the trees to keep the bears from climbing the trees to get to our feeders. And the top of the 10 would be anywhere from 10 to 12 feet off the ground. And we've actually had them pull the top of the 10 loose from the trees. And the one that when it pulled it off, it actually left blood on it. And of course, at the time, I wasn't thinking nothing about, we've got this kind of evidence or nothing like that. It's like, well, who's going to believe this, you know?
Well, some of us would.
Yeah,
And it's amazing. You did say something that, that was interesting. Once they are stopped moving, you do not hear them, and they apparently vanish
yeah,
because you could hear footsteps retreating or walking away. Correct?
yeah. I, I, I don't know necessarily that they vanish, um, because from the looks of the pads that's on the Patterson Gimlin film, the pad that's on the feet looks a lot like the pads on the bear's feet. And I think you only hear them when they want you to hear them, because I have heard them, and I've got bad hearing, so when I hear one, I know it's got to be close. And I've heard them walk back and forth, pacing back and forth, and then not hear nothing, but then move and see it moving with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It it goes into stealth mode, so to speak.
Right. Well, I mean, I know I had my experience up in the North Georgia mountains in Rabun County, and when I was in a cabin, and something slammed against the cabin on the left-hand side, and then it started walking around to the front door, and I was terrified. I've told this story several times. I was terrified, but I never heard any other sounds, and whoever it was certainly gone by morning.
Yeah.
But I don't. I mean, I suspect that they vanish or walk into a portal myself. I mean, that's what I think.
And they may do. And one thing that I say when I'm speaking and stuff, if I ever have that kind of encounter, I'll be the first one to admit it. You know what I mean? But I've never seen anything like that happen, so I can't say yes or no or what. You know what I mean? Because
Well,
I'm speaking about something I don't know nothing about.
well,
Everything
I
that
mean, I'm just surmising what could possibly happen because when the leaves were dry, when I had that experience, the leaves were very dry, and I feel like had something decided to walk away, I would have heard it walk away.
uh-huh.
But that's
Um,
just me, Tim.
well, and it may have, being in the woods as much as I am, and as long as I've been hunting and stuff, I'm getting ready to turn 57 years old this year. So I've been in the woods hunting ever since I was 6 years old. So, I've spent a lot of time in the woods, and um, I do know that deer and even bear, if they don't want you to hear them, you're not going to hear them. They can sneak through and never make a sound. So I don't know,
Okay.
in your case, I don't know. I wasn't there, so I can't say one way or the other. But I don't. I have learned that just because I ain't seen it or heard it, don't mean it don't happen. It's just that I've not seen it or heard it yet.
Right. And I just that's just what I think. But it was totally frightening. It sounds like they know you, don't they?
Yeah. Um, Actually, for on my buddy's property, for about the first year and a half, 2 years, we got a lot of screaming, yelling, throwing. Um, and after that, it seemed like they sort of accepted us once they saw that we wasn't going to bother them. We wasn't coming in to do nothing to them. We was just coming in hunting. Um, we, I've got a set of photos where we kept on getting blank pictures on our trail cam. It would just be a blacked out picture. So we thought the cameras wasn't no good. And so we started with throwing cameras away and buying new cameras and all of that stuff. And come to find out, we finally got a picture of one. It was standing so close to the camera that it almost blacked it out, but you could see the hair on the side of its leg. And in the sequence of pictures, I had a live trap that we was trapping coyotes in, but a raccoon had got in it. And in that sequence of pictures, a little after 12 midnight, that coon is the last picture of the coon in the trap is a little after 12 midnight. At 3:42, it takes another picture, which was the side of the leg. And in that same minute, it takes another picture, and the coon's gone out of the trap. But the only thing is, the trap is about 25, 30 feet away from where the trap is. The camera and the trap are about 25, 30 feet apart. So while the one was taking the coon out of the trap, another one had to be standing in front of it. So when you're talking that kind of intelligence, I don't put nothing past them.
Okay. Well, that's a good observation. Well, I mean, we're here, and I love to hear people's Bigfoot exploration stories. You got another couple stories you'd share with us tonight?
Oh, yes, sir. I have seen, to date, I have seen four of them. And two of those was while I was hunting. The latest one I saw that I got the very best look at was on December the 1st of 21. I was in one of my research areas and had been in and switched all my trail cams and my recorders and all of that, and decided I was going to go back around to the side of the mountain where it wasn't windy, and I was going to sit there and hunt till dark. And I got around there, and I'd been sitting there for about an hour and a half, and a rock come and landed out in the clear cut. And at first I was like, well, maybe it wasn't a rock. Maybe I just seen a bird go through, and just happened to be a woodpecker hit a tree at the same time, or just trying to miss it. And I kept sitting there, and I felt something watching me. And I turned around, and there was one that was, I'd say, at the most 100 yards from me. And it was standing there. I could see from its right shoulder was behind the tree, and everything else I could see. So I was sitting there watching it, and it was just standing there watching me. And I got my phone out, and I'd just gotten this iPhone. I'd never had one. I had the old flip type phone, and I'm trying to bumble around and trying to get it to zoom in, and I can't get it to do what I want. And I'm wanting to get a good look at its face before it leaves. So I lay my phone down, and I pick my rifle up, my deer rifle, and I get the scope up, and I turn around to get a look at its face. And as soon as it sees me pick that rifle up and turn, it steps behind the tree to where I can't see nothing but its left shoulder. And it stayed like that the whole time I had my rifle in my hands. And I thought, well, I don't want it to think that I'm going to hurt it. So I laid my rifle down. And I laid my rifle down, and I started watching. As long as I turned around and was looking straight at it, it wouldn't move. So I started just turning my head a little bit and watching it out of the corner of my eye. And I seen it go from standing on 2 feet down to all fours. And it went like an army crawl from one clump of trees to the next clump. And then once it got there, it stayed there for a few seconds, and then it army crawled back across the ridge. I reckon from the way it had come in. That was the third one I'd saw, and that's the one that I got the best um, personal. We've got some on camera, but the that I got to see with my own eyes, the details. It was probably, I'd say, pushing 7.5, maybe 8 foot tall, um, and it was a charcoal gray color. And like I say, I got to see it long enough to see some features, but I was wanting to see its face up close, you know, to where I could see mouth and nose and all of that stuff. And looking back on it, I shouldn't have picked my gun up, and I might have could have. I maybe would have had enough time to eventually get something on my phone, but I didn't know how long, you know, that it would last. So I just wanted to see what I could before it got gone.
Right. Well, that was interesting. And how long did the entire experience last?
Um, I'd say altogether maybe 25, 30 seconds. But it seemed at the time, you know, it seemed like everything just slowed down because I'm like, there it is. You know, I wouldn't be surprised to see one maybe peeking out from behind a tree, but for it to be standing there out in the open, all but that right shoulder, you know, it's the first thing I thought was, well, there it is. And so then my second thought was, well, get you phone and try to get a picture or something like that. And fidgeting around, I never did get it drawn up enough to where I could get a good look at it.
Well, for sure you didn't scare it.
Oh, I think I, I think when it saw me pick my gun up, I think it got uneasy because you know there I am getting ready to point a gun in that direction, and I'm sure they've been and watched hunters come through the woods and shoot stuff and all of that to where they know, you know, when they see that gun, they know it's something that they don't want to have to deal with.
Right. Well, that's a heck of a story. You got any more good ones? I'm certainly enjoying your stories here.
Yes, sir. In the research area that I was talking about, that is across the road, not across the road, but across the ridge from my buddy's property, me and Dwight Campbell were going in there to change our recorders and stuff out, and we was walking around. It's an old logging road with an old growed up clear cut, and coming around to the point, and off of that point, we found out later that where that thing was sitting at, it could watch anything coming in or going out. But we were walking in and we smelled it and we stopped to talk about it. And that's one thing that we've learned. The smell they could do is not permanent. It's like a defense mechanism with a skunk or something like that. And the reason we know that is because we've had too many encounters to where we smell them and the wind don't change and they'll parallel right with us, but you don't smell them no more. You know, and after you do that 5 or 6 times, you pretty much learn that they do it when they want to. But anyway, we were standing there talking and about smelling it and looking for it, and all of a sudden I just seen something just sort of flutter, and I thought it was a bird to start with. And I told my buddy Dwight, I said, something is moving in that clear cut. I said, it may not be nothing more than a bird flittering around. I said, but I seen something move, but it was, you know how it is when they're around, how quiet it gets. There was no birds chirping, hollering, nothing like that. We talked
Right.
3 or 4, 5 minutes, and it done it again. And I told my buddy Dwight, I said, something moved in that clear cut again. So he took his camera that he had mounted on his chest and he zoomed in and video of it. And then when he got home, he sent me the picture, a still picture out of it. And you can see it. It's crouched down and it's got a bright green leaf across its forehead. But you can see the eyes, the top pointed head up above the leaf. You can see the bridge of the nose sticking out. And so when we seen that and we went back in 2 weeks to change our stuff out, we got up there and found that when they had done that clear cut, the bulldozer had come in and pushed a berm of dirt up, and that thing was squatted back behind that berm of dirt, watching everything coming in and going out. And so that was the first one that I seen, even though I did see it moving. I just didn't get a good look at it. And also that same area, I went in one morning bow hunting, and it was that time of morning where I can walk without my flashlight, not daylight, but just enough to where I can see. And I get walked up and get ready to take my backpack off. And when I hunt off the ground. I don't sit on in a stand or nothing like that. I just sit on the ground with my back against the tree. And I took my backpack off and was getting ready to sit down, and a doe deer run down the hill towards me. And she got about 20 yards from me and stopped, and her eyes was real bugged out like she was panicked. And she turned around and run back up the hill, turned around and run back down to me, turn around and run back up, and she run back and forth about 5 or 6 times. And I thought, well, what's that crazy thing of doing? And so I just kept standing there to see what she was going to do. And finally, the last time she come down to me, she ran about halfway back up and just stood there. And I finally lost sight of her because it was still pretty green and everything. And in about 45 minutes at the top of the clear cut, I hear two of them holler at me. And I tell everybody it honestly sounded like they was cussing me out. I don't know if they was or not, but I think what I'd accidentally done, I think had gotten in on their deer drive. I think the one was pushing it down that ridge to one that was waiting on her. And when I come in, it had to go hide because I was walking right through the middle of where it was going to be. And like I say, they hollered and screamed. I about 6 times, just raising cane. And so I've had that encounter. I've also in another one of my research areas, I went in, and the gates had been Forest Service gates had been locked for a while, so I was going in to clean my I was going in to um, get my recorder and stuff, and they was a bunch of limbs and stuff that had broke across my trail. So every time I go in, I'll always clean my trails out so that I know when something's been disturbed since I was there last time. So I was documenting all this stuff, and I come to a curve in the road, and in that curve, there's a limb hanging fresh broke about 7.5 feet high. So I reach up and snap it off. And of course, I take my phone out and say, well, they broke this since I was in here last time. And I document it and break it off and throw it down. And I go into this laurel thicket. And since I was in there the last time, they had run a stick in that laurel thicket sideways to where it would have hit me about chest high. So I get my phone out and I document it, and I take the stick out and throw it down. And I come out of the laurel thicket on the other side. And this place, it takes me about an hour and a half to walk in there. So I'm sitting down resting a minute, and this rock comes over my head and lands out in front of me in an old growed up clear cut. So I get my phone out and I document that, and I go on and change my stuff out. And I come back, and in that curve where I broke that one limb off, there were two fresh limbs that had been broke since I was there. It had broke it since I'd walked through there and laid them across my trail. So I took my phone out and documented it, and I had to go through this narrow spot that's got a lot of laurels and stuff at the edge of it. And I hear one growl at me. And I'm like, okay, I ain't got time to fool with you. So I come through the other side, and it growls at me again. And I've learned, not just me, but the guys that I go with, we've learned just ignore them. When they do something like that, just ignore them, because usually it's like a cat and a mouse. If that mouse plays dead, the cat loses interest. So we just ignore them, and of course we try to see if we can see them and that kind of stuff, but we don't take off running and screaming and all of that. But um, it growled at me the second time, and I started to step across this little branch, and they'd hung a stick that would have hit me across the bridge of my nose since I'd come through. It'd been about 45 minutes since I'd been there, and I know it wasn't there when I come through because I'd had to moved it to got across the branch, and so I moved, document that, throw it down, and I get on down into the main road, and it's still an old Forest Service road that's locked and you can't drive on it or nothing. So I'm walking the old logging road back to my truck, and they have broken down a maple tree that was about the size of a softball and laid it over top of a locust tree that I had to crawl in under that was laying across the road. I couldn't step over it, so I had to crawl under it. And while I was gone, they'd also broken that and laid it across the trail while I'd been gone. Um, and
Wow.
that area there, it they come in when I first started hunting that area. I didn't see no Bigfoot sign, but I seen a lot, and me and you spoke a little bit about it. Um, a lot there before I ever saw any kind of Bigfoot stuff, and it just the orange light. It looked like an old lantern light moving through the woods, and I thought it was my buddy. But when I walked down there and turned my flashlight on, it was gone. And I walked down to it, and he wasn't there. And I got back down in the road, and he wasn't even at the place where we were hunting at and where I was at. He went on around the road, and he hadn't come back and picked me up. And when he got there, I told him, I said, I seen the weirdest thing. There's a orange ball of light moving between where I was at and the road down here. And he said he was sitting in my truck talking to his wife, and that orange ball of light come from below the road up into the road and then went up the bank into where I saw it at. So uh, that's one of them things that I ain't got a clue what it was because, I it disappeared, and I ain't, but I do know that it wasn't long after that I did start finding Bigfoot sign in there, and it has become one of my best research areas.
Very good. And they're still around when you go in there, right?
Oh yes, sir. There's a lot of times that I'll be walking up and rocks will get thrown and that kind of stuff, and me just walking in, um, just to go in and deer hunt. And there's a lot of time. That's one place that, other than the growls, I've not heard any vocalizations yet, other than just the growls. But they're still leaving a lot of sign. They'll still mess with my trails and mess with my cameras. And I've got a sequence of pictures where a stick in the middle of the night, I think it's a little after midnight, a stick comes up in the middle of my trail camera and triggers my trail camera to make it go off. And I'm back. Like I say, it takes me an hour and a half to walk in there, and I've all the years that I've been hunting in there, I've got one other guy on my trail cam, so I don't think it was somebody sticking a stick up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's
And
so interesting. I mean, that's a lot of fun. You just enjoy going out there hunting, and you know they're there, and you and they just kind of coexist, don't you?
yeah, yeah, honestly, we do. It's one of them things to. It's to me, some of the places that I used to hunt, I don't hunt no more just out of respect. I've still got plenty of places I can go hunt and all of that stuff without bothering them. So some of the places I've let them just have it. We still go in and do research and stuff, but um, some of the areas I still hunt because that's some of my favorite hunting places.
Right, because you hunt because you like to hunt.
Oh yeah,
Exactly.
And not far from where you had the Georgia um, conference, we have actually, me and my buddy Dwight Campbell and Robin Moonshadow, had come down from Canada, and
Excuse me, you know Robin Moonshadow? She's a friend of mine.
yes, sir, I know her real good. She's my buddy Dwight Campbell's girlfriend, I reckon. If not, I just got in trouble.
Wow, wow. I tell you what, after the show, do you have a phone number for her? For some reason, it got gone. That and a bunch of them got gone when I got a new phone. And I'd love to call her up. I've had her on as a guest several times on here talking about the little people and everything like that.
I'll check. If I don't, the way I usually get a hold of her is just on Facebook.
Yeah, just message her. Yeah.
Yeah, but
She is so nice.
I've got your number, so I can give it to her and tell her to get in touch with you.
Yeah, I'd love to tell her I want her back on the show. She's dynamite, and
It definitely is.
she's
Um,
got great stories about it. It's so funny. You know, it is a small world in this Bigfoot and paranormal research community. You know, you're talking about a friend of mine, Robin Moonshadow. This is great, and and we just it is a small world, don't you think?
it is, and it. How do you put it? It is and it ain't. I mean, for the people that do the research like we do, it's a small world. But then you go to these conferences and festivals and all of that stuff, and you get tons of people coming in. Yeah, now I've had this happen and that happen, and it amazes me because until 2008, if you asked me if there's such a thing as Bigfoot, I'd have said if they are, it would be in the Pacific Northwest. I've always believed the Patterson Gimlin film. And so I figured, well, if they are, they're out that way. They ain't nothing in North Carolina. Like I say,
Oh boy, were you wrong.
ain't that the truth?
Well, that's okay. You know, we live and we learn. I guarantee you. I mean, I've had 7 or 8 experiences in what I call northeast Georgia. That's a good way to describe Rabun County, don't you think?
It is. Um, and I'm right on the line with Rayburn County and also South Carolina. They all come. Macon County has got all three right there together: North Carolina, Georgia, and South Carolina.
Right. You're obviously really near Oconee County in South
Yeah,
Carolina, right?
yeah. And but the place that I was telling you about, not far from where the conference was, me and Robin and Dwight were up there, and I was showing them a tree. I was in there with my dad, and we'd hunted down there for years, and never had no kind of interactions or never seen nothing out of place, never heard nothing. And I was down there um, during turkey season, and that time of morning again, like it was when I was bow hunting, to where I could walk without my flashlight, and I hear a turkey gobble, so I put my gloves and stuff on, my face mask, and I'm walking an old logging road, and I just stand still to see exactly where the turkey's gobbling, where I need to get set, and all that stuff. And I'm listening, and all of a sudden I hear a whoop, and whoop, and I thought, no, not down here. I mean, I'm used to them up close to the house, the other places that I've hunted, but I've never run in.
But now you better remember it could have been Ric Flair.
No, not it. This one was more of a you. Honestly, when I heard it, and it followed me for about 150 yards. Every time I would stop and get ready to do a call, it would whoop at me. But it wasn't the big loud. It was more like, it's getting daylight. You need to come on. I'm a pretty good sized feller, and I guess with me with my dark camouflages on with no white showing, nothing like that, it might have thought I was one of them. But once it got daylight enough for me to see, or for it to see, um, that I wasn't one. It hushed, and I never heard nothing the rest of the day. I stayed in there till after 3 o'clock. The turkey never made another sound after it whooped that first time. And
Or let's put it this way: the turkey might not have made it either.
well, that is true. Um, and I got to thinking, there's all kind of cabbage and tomato fields not far from there. So they may be a coming down and going into those cabbage and tomato fields after dark. And I might have just caught one as it was heading back to wherever it was going to hide out at. Um,
Well,
anyway,
if, if they want to bring me a cabbage, I'd love
yeah, that's some good ones. um,
it.
but that was in the spring, about this time of year. Well, actually, is in April because our turkey season don't open till April. So it was in April, and that fall we went in and we was finding a place for my dad to hunt, and he can't get around the best in the world, so we was finding him a place where he wouldn't have to walk up the hills or nothing like that. And we went in and kicked him out of spot and found an old road he could walk around. And we come back out, and you could see where something with 5 fingers had reached up on the pine tree, probably 7.5 feet, and you could see where the thumb had went around it, and the 4 fingers, and it had tore all the bark and stuff off of it. So I was in there showing Dwight and Robin that tree, and all of a sudden, Robin heard a wood knock not long after we got there, and we seen some structures we was looking at and all that stuff, and we started around the road that that tree was in, and up on the ridge above us, one starts making noises. I've never heard them do that kind of noise. It was weird sounding, and so we just stopped to see what was going to happen, and it just stayed out of sight of us and dropped down below us, and then got between us and our vehicles, and it started doing. Uh, it sounded like a gorilla bluff charge, just that like that. So we're just standing there, just wondering what it's going to do. And finally, it just moved on, and we went on around, and we dropped off down in there where it was at, looking for tracks and stuff, and we found some real small tracks. So evidently, Robin found a nest down in there. So evidently, Mama had the baby down in there while she was on the ridge top hunting, and then we started between them, and she had to come off and get the baby, and they moved on out.
Gotcha. That's a great story. It really is. Tim, I have enjoyed these stories of yours. Um, would you come back? Can you gather a few more stories and come back here pretty soon?
Oh yes, sir. I've got um, I've just I ain't bragging. I just happen, like I always say, I just happen to be in the wrong place at the right time for some reason. But I've had I've had quite a few encounters with them.
You know, I seem to be in the right place at the right time. Um, I just, and I don't try, things just happen around me. I don't know if I've told you this or not, but I have a roommate. He's the gentleman that passed away, who used to own this place.
Uh huh.
And and whenever I clean up and I'll go in the living room and sit down, I hear him banging around in the kitchen. It's like he likes the fact that I clean it up. Now, right now, I've got all my papers strode out.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the way it is in my place. I have piles of stuff so that I can, as quickly as possible, find it. But when I clean up, I'll hear some knocking around because I've got a roommate, and it's a very interesting roommate.
That also at that one place where I was telling you that the one followed men to White, that thing followed us a mile and a half into our research area and back out. And that same area, um, we took Robin in there and we actually got hair samples off of a pine tree where they
Well,
had been getting the sap off of the pine trees.
well, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, listen, collect a few more stories, get back out in the woods, and let me get you back here sometime pretty soon. And also, I would like to have some members of either one of your research groups, NCI or what is it, Dirty South Squatching. So
Yes, sir.
I'll call you, and maybe you can bring some of them around, and we can all share some more stories. How about that?
That would be great. I've known Dwight Campbell and Bob Trent in Dirty South Squash, and I've known them a lot longer than to have the guys in the other group. The other guys have got, they've got a lot of good stuff. But I know Bob and Dwight, they have tons of encounters, dog man, just all sorts of stuff.
Well, if you're in the woods, you're going to have encounters. But
Yep.
I do have a question for you.
Okay.
It seems as though maybe 30, 35 years ago, I didn't hear so many Bigfoot stories. Did you?
No, sir. I've honestly wondered, and it's just it's one of those things that I don't think you'd be able to prove one way or the other. But I've often wondered, when the settlers come over here, there's a lot of reports of them shooting wild men out in the woods and all of that stuff. And if you read the newspapers, what they're describing is a wild hairy man, 7.5 feet tall, covered in hair, and all of that stuff. Well, I wonder how many of them went that never got put in the paper, because they think they've killed somebody and never say nothing about it. And I'm wondering if the numbers are just now starting to get built up to where there's more of them. We ain't as trigger happy now as what we was
Well,
when we
yeah,
first.
and maybe they feel like with a lot of people, they can kind of come out a little bit, and they're not going to have someone try to blow their head off. Which
Yeah.
I
Um,
know I'm not going to be part of that, and neither are the people that I'm around. So yeah, that's I hope that is the case.
um, when I first started running into it, I told my buddy, I said, I'll kill one and I'll finally prove without a shadow of a doubt that they're real. But after hearing those two talk back and forth to each other on two different occasions, I decided I don't care if anybody ever believes it or not. I'm not going to kill something that intelligent just so somebody can say, yeah, they're real or they're not real. You know,
Right.
it's up to them to believe it or don't believe it. That ain't going to change what I know. But I don't, and I've also learned that even if you did kill one, more than likely it's going to be taken away from you, and you're going to be silenced one way or the other.
That's right. I don't want any part of that either. Do you? I know
No,
you. Yeah.
um,
So we will be part of the Bigfoot Conservation Committee,
that's
and
it.
we can live and let live with them. And I know
And
from what I understand, they're like humans. They're the really good ones. They're the average ones, and a couple of them are bad, but a couple of humans are bad, and some are really good.
well,
So
humans, animals, all of them. There's good and bads in all of them.
that's
You
right. So let's try to stay nice. And I know that may sound just crazy and dumb, but yeah, let's try to be nice to the Bigfoot. We're out there in their living rooms. They're not in ours.
yeah.
So anyway, look, Tim, it's been great having you on here. This is Tim Dills. He is with Dirty South Squatching. He is also with NCI, North Carolina Investigates. And thanks a lot to George Lunsford for having you there. So I got to meet you, but I'm going to have you back soon. You've been
Okay.
really, you got some great stories. I love them. Just hearing someone tell some Bigfoot stories, they're really cool. So look, thanks a lot, and we'll have you back. This is Dr. John Stamey, live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We'll be back next time with more paranormal on Bigfoot and Company on YouTube and iHeartRadio under ScaryCast. So catch us on iHeartRadio or Bigfoot and Company on YouTube. So come on back, see you then, and Tim, we'll be having this posted by tomorrow. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.